Emerson Lynn, and I'm editor, co-publisher of the St. Albans Messenger. And I'd like to welcome all those who slogged through our third nor'easter in about as many days. I think we're giving a new meeting to Survive Vermont, right? And this is also a real gathering of our community centered on the basic need to be an informed, engaged citizenry. I'd like to recognize those in attendance to illustrate the gravity and the support involved in putting together tonight's meeting. First is the obvious extensive support of our law enforcement community, many of those in front of you right now, beginning with our own. We also have police chiefs and people from their community representing a number of cities all the way through Vermont, as far away as Rutland, Newport, and Grand Isle, in fact. We also have with us the Vermont Department of Public Safety Commissioner, Thomas Anderson, the Vermont Department of Health officials led by our own Judy Ashland, and we have the Northwest Vermont Medical Reserve Corps that's doing much of the work as you walk in this evening. We also have officials from our local emergency services and care, our schools. Kevin Dirth, Superintendent of Schools, is here. And municipal officials from the city and the town, and the healthcare community, certainly led by Northwestern Medical Center. We also have students here tonight from Bellows Free Academy, students who signaled their strong support for measures that address their safety. And they're here, you may see, with the orange armbands, as are there many in the audience who also have the same armbands. Thank you all for attending and being part of this vital process. As we have learned, Vermont is not immune from the threat of violence. What happened in Parkland, Florida, can happen here. And allegedly, Vermont narrowly escaped its own school shooting tragedy at Fairhaven High School, all thanks to a student who spoke up. We're here tonight because it behooves us to know our options, to know the right things to do. It's important to know that contingency plans have been developed at all points of public interest, particularly our schools, are part of a web of protection that's been put in place. It's important to know that your law enforcement and public health community are prepared in case the threat materializes. Tonight, it's also important to know what this meeting is about and what it's not about. What it's not about is politics. The purpose is not to debate tonight the right or wrong of a particular political choice. What this meeting is about is the need to be engaged and properly informed. The purpose is to be armed with good information, to have you know that all options are being actively considered. The purpose is for you to know that meetings of this nature are safe places to be. And the process is one that needs to be told and retold throughout our communities. That's your job going forward. Tonight we'll be divided into 3 segments: see something, say something, run, hide, fight, and stop the bleed. It's a presentation meant to inform the general public as to what they can do to protect themselves and their family members should they be confronted with a violent threat situation. To begin this conversation, I'd like to introduce St. Albans Police Chief Gary Taylor. And we would also afterwards have a question and answer period set aside for the last 15 minutes, so please hold your questions until then. Gary?
Thanks, Emerson. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'm the Chief of Police here in St. Albans. This is my 41st year, full-time year in law enforcement. I don't think that makes me a dinosaur because I think I'm still engaged every day, and I try to be engaged every day. I've been the police chief here since July 2005. My wife and I both raised our children in this community, and they went to the same schools that most of your children are in. For more than 5 years now, I have been passionate about active shooter, school shooting, types of incidents, and I've done everything that I can so that we can learn about it and we can be as prepared as possible if an event like that were to occur here. I really didn't understand and still don't understand why we're not having more public conversations about options. I think what happens is when we talk about these types of events, we're almost overwhelmed. It's an uncomfortable subject. So I think we think if we don't talk about it, maybe it won't happen. But the truth of the matter is the frequency of these events seems to have increased over the years, and at least the bad guys seem to be learning from one another. So we have to do the same thing. We've come a long way since Columbine, when we used to surround and just make everybody sit tight until we waited for the special teams to show up. And we learned, unfortunately, the hard way, that that wasn't the best way for us to respond to those. We've gone a lot of trouble in St. Albans to make sure that every single officer is trained in every way that they can be in active shooter. Everybody's active shooter trained. We do additional training with the Border Patrol, with a simulator. We do tactical EMS, and everybody's trained for tactical EMS. We've created, we've front-loaded all of the schools and the major institutions where, after doing threat assessments, that we believe something could happen at. And let me just tell you in a really short story about how that happened. I went to two of my commanders one day, and I said to them, please take a piece of yellow paper and write down everything that we should do if hypothetically we had an active shooter right now, and I named the location in the city. Write down everything we should do and who should do it, who's gonna do it. And I went back to my office and I started making a list too. And I watched my watch, and 10 minutes later I walked in and said, the shooting's been over for 3 minutes. Because at the time, they were saying that the average school shooting lasted 3 to 7 minutes. It'd been over 3 minutes already. We hadn't finished our list with who was going to do what. And that's when I realized that we can't waste time doing those things when we could front load all of those things. So we sat down and started front loading everything that we could, right down to who was going to be in charge, who was going to lead the active shooter team, who was going to manage the 911 call center and the dispatch center. We pre-planned the broadcast that would go out to other agencies for assistance, where we would post our emergency responders who are coming to assist us, how we would manage them, who would take charge of that. So I tell you that only because I don't think people realize how much time and energy goes into thinking about things that you hope will never happen. In St. Albans, I'm also the emergency management director, so my job is to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And God forbid, we don't plan for those types of things, so that if and when they happen, we stand in front of people and say, well, I just never really thought that was going to happen here. Because that's not much of an excuse. So I'm very pleased about the people who have turned out. Thank you so much to the law enforcement, EMS, fire communities, the school community that has shown up and shown interest. What I'm really hoping for is that this will be the beginning, a stepping off point for all of us to start to have a dialogue about what we should do. What you're going to hear a lot about tonight are 3 models that are being used across the country. They're tried and true. And we didn't invent this, but we do think that it's best practice, at least for our community. We've been practicing run, hide, fight in the city of St. Albans, in the town of St. Albans, and mostly throughout the county. I don't want to speak for everybody. But since Sandy Hook, as a result of learning lessons from that event. I believe that we've avoided this conversation extensively because we're afraid to talk about it. And I think it's time that we talk responsibly, not over dramatically, but we talk responsibly about what if. And maybe we have conversations with our kids and with our grandchildren and with our nieces and nephews about what are you going to do? What are you going to do if something happens? Because anything in a textbook is wonderful, but it has to have application in our lives, right? Over the past 2 decades of my career, I have found myself ear deep in pre-planning. And we pre-plan for everything because we become the front line of defense for international terrorism, domestic terrorism, active shooter events, school shooting events, and a host of other things. One of the things that we spend a lot of time doing in the emergency management meetings, and we meet every month, I have a team of people that meet every month, is we talk about what we should have policies and procedures for, or protocols, under what circumstances. Do we have the capacity to deal with this, and if we don't, how are we going to manage it? Do we have the right equipment? Do we have the right training? And have we developed the right partnerships? I'm really pleased to tell you that we now have the students on board as a partner in our efforts. We met with them yesterday morning, the principal of the high school, myself and the SRO, and we talked extensively about what we can do to support one another and to make our schools safer, and the types of training that we can provide to them, the types of information we can provide to them. So there are two predominant models that are used in response to active shooter incidents throughout our region. One is a program called ALICE, which stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And I'm pleased to say Rob Evans is with us here this evening. He's the state coordinator for the ALICE program in school public safety. He's in the back of the room. Can you stand up, Rob, so everybody can see you? Rob is retired Vermont State Police Officer. If you want to talk to him about ALICE or have questions about what it is he does or the resource materials that they provide on the website, I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you. Maybe at the end of this, you could seek him out. Again, I want to tell you about Run, Hide, Fight. Both of these models embrace the same 3 core principles, which are, in my estimation, and I know this is oversimplified, run, hide, or fight. It's not a ladder, it's a continuum. What you do will depend entirely on where you are when the event starts to unfold. And what you do may be simply temporary so you can move to your next option. But I don't know about the rest of you, but if I were in a shopping center and a clerk ran up to me and said, "Get in that closet and stay there until the police get here," I don't know if I'd cooperate with them. And part of my rationale is I want to participate in decision making. On the other hand, if we provide people with possible options so that they don't feel overwhelmed, so that they feel empowered to decide for themselves, I might choose that same closet. I might decide that's a good idea, I'm going to do that. But I want to be a person who's participating in that. And I think, in my opinion, it's empowering to know that there are options that you can exercise. Doesn't mean we can prevent everything or that we can save everybody. We probably can't. And I hope and pray it never happens to us. But in the event that it does, we have to be prepared to minimize access for the individual who's trying to do what they're doing, and to minimize casualties, and to be able to respond to and treat people who have been injured as a result of it. These 3 principles are simple. If you see something, say something. Pretty self-explanatory. Parkland, Florida is probably the best example of that situation, where the minute someone saw something, they called, but wouldn't it have been great if somebody had tipped them off in advance, like what happened in Vermont? It didn't. So you have to deal with, it is what it is, and you have to deal with that. But if you see something, say something's all about giving the right individuals an opportunity to prevent whatever is going to happen. And I know some people say, "Wow, I don't want to call the cops." Well, don't call the cops then. Call the principal. Call a friend that you know will pass the information on. But call somebody. Tell somebody so that we can at least try to do something about it. I'm not going to get into Run, Hide, Fight because Captain Hope's going to get up here and tell you all about it. But I want to tell you about Stop the Bleed. I just want to give you an overview, a peek from above. Following Orlando, the Orlando shooting and Las Vegas, people realized that one of the things that's going to inevitably happen in a crisis scene like that is some people aren't going to leave. And they're not going to leave because they probably have attachments to people who are there. Someone they were with was injured, or somebody they care about, or they made friends with, and they want to do something. So what happened is some people got together and said, if you're going to stay, you can make a difference. And here's some ways that you can make a difference. In a traumatic event like that, the greatest loss of life is due to blood loss. So you need to stop the bleed. You have to stop the person from bleeding if you can. And you're going to hear tonight about what you can do to do that. It's important that we're compassionate, and in some cases, maybe the only thing available to us is to try to comfort the person. But wouldn't we feel more empowered if we thought, I might be able to save them, rather than to just comfort them until somebody gets here? Because you're going to hear about how fast things happen when people are bleeding. I really do hope that no one in here ever has to experience being present in an active shooter incident. But I do know this. The things that we're going to tell you about tonight are universally applicable. You can use them if you're in a movie theater. You can use them if you're in a mall. You can use them if you're in a school. You can use them if you're in a workplace. It doesn't matter where you are. These same three theories, principles, are applicable to all of those. And I hope this is the beginning of something bigger than me. I hope we across the state all start talking the same language, and that, you know, what I've offered to my law enforcement partners is I'll give them the material that we're using to do this so they can bring it back to their own community. Because I don't have to stand in front of every community. I'm not trying to get a check mark on a box somewhere. But I think we would do a great in-service if we weren't all talking the same language to everybody in the state, and we owe it to our citizens. Having said that, thank you for coming here tonight. I just want to tell you that the volunteers in the hallway have taken your name so that people can get a certificate of attendance when you leave here tonight, if that's helpful for you, or if you need that or want that. I would suggest you just take it and do whatever you want with it, but in some cases it may have some value. Captain Ron Hope's going to talk to you about it. If you see something, say something, and run, hide, fight.
Give us just a second. We've got a short video that we're going to present here.
Hello, my name is Dr. John Minadeo. I'm an emergency physician and the medical director of the emergency department at Northwestern Medical Center. NMC is joining forces with the St. Albans Police Department and Care Ambulance Services, as well as the Vermont Department of Health, in an effort to educate and train the public on what to do in the event of an emergency. The campaign is called SURVIVErmont. It is a three-tiered program designed to assist the community in emergency preparedness. The techniques that are taught Hello, my name is Dr. John Minadeo. I'm an emergency physician and the medical director of the emergency department at Northwestern Medical Center. NMC is joining forces with the St. Albans Police Department and Care Ambulance Services, as well as the Vermont Department of Health, in an effort to educate and train the public on what to do in the event of an emergency. The campaign is called SURVIVErmont. It is a three-tiered program designed to assist the community in emergency preparedness. The The techniques that are taught do not require extensive training, are easy to learn, and yet can absolutely be life-saving. Just like bystanders knowing CPR and how to use an AED have been proven to save lives in medical emergencies, so too can these techniques in traumatic emergencies. And just like CPR, the more who are familiar with the techniques, the better we will be collectively. And so does our hope to disseminate the knowledge and skills in this campaign throughout the state of Vermont so that no one should feel powerless in the event of an emergency.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thanks again for everyone coming. As the chief said, my name is Ron Hogue. I'm a captain with the police department, and this is my 26th year in law enforcement. I've been with St. Albans now for the second time for 10 years. The reason that I'm teaching this tonight is because I've also been a firearms instructor for 15 years, and I'm also the tactical commander for the police department, and also the Northwest Special Response Team, which is a collaborative effort between ourselves and the Franklin County Sheriff's Office as a multi-agency tactical unit. I've taught this program or similar programs such as this for probably about the last 5 years on Run, Hide, Fight to several different businesses here in town, the school administration, and a few other organizations that have asked us to do this program. So this program, what I'm hoping what you're going to get out of this is just some basic skills. As the chief said, we all have to be prepared in our daily lives. And what we're doing is we're trying to give you a little bit more knowledge in what to do in a critical incident. So as the disclaimer here that we have says, this isn't meant to scare anybody. It's not meant to dissuade someone from ever going out of their house ever again. Okay? Who's ever had that feeling with all of the events that have been going on that I should never leave my house? Right? It can be really scary to listen to all of these things on the news every single night. Okay? What we want to do is, and like the chief said, is to give you empowerment and to give you some skills that will make you feel like you are able to do something for your own safety. Okay? In our kids. So, just a couple of definitions, okay? So while the training is going to focus on active shooters for tonight, this applies to a multitude of different types of incidents, okay? Fires, disturbed individuals, natural disasters, man-made incidents, all of these types of things can be something where you can find yourself in mortal danger, okay? And that's the idea of this program, is to give you some options in those situations. So, what we define as an active shooter is someone who is actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. What that basically means is the person, and we're going to be politically correct, it can be female or male, as we saw in San Bernardino. This person is actively involved in trying to injure or kill people. Okay? That's what we're talking about. For us as the police, that's an important term because it dictates how we respond to that. Our training as police officers is that when we have an active shooter, somebody who's actively shooting, whether they're shooting people or not, or they're shooting just at people, okay? We're going to take that seriously and we're going to respond to that. All of our officers are trained that they will respond to that just themselves if that's all there is, okay? And they will actively engage that person in order to stop that threat. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Okay, so in most of the cases, as we know from the news, active shooters use firearms and there's no pattern or method or selection to their victims. Sometimes there are cases where these guys will have an intended target that they're specifically searching for or specifically trying to harm. But most times, as we've seen, it's indiscriminate. They're just there to make their body count as heavy as possible. And sometimes I believe that it's driven by who can have the biggest body count, who can be the most famous, right? That's unfortunate that people think like that. But truthfully, we have to be honest with ourselves. There is genuine evil in this world, okay? All right, so active shooter situations obviously are unpredictable and evolve very, very quickly. The average that we'll see is 3 to 5 minutes, okay? And it's usually over with before the police get there. So what we do when we train specifically on this type of thing, when we train citizens and folks in business, is that in those 3 to 5 minutes, we have to give them ways in order to prevent any further harm prior to the police getting there. We always try to stress that that person is under a time clock, okay? They're on a time clock. From the time that that first shot goes off, when they harm their first person, to the time that the police get there and engage them, they are on a clock, okay? So they have to actually carry out whatever devious act it was that they planned on doing. They have to carry that out because they know that we're coming, okay? They know our training. They know what we're there to do. So they have to do that quickly. So how do we, as citizens, the police, everyone, how do we as citizens counter that? I'm looking for an answer from the crowd. How do we counter that? What are some of the ways that we can counter it?
Inform anybody as soon as you can.
Exactly. Get the word out there as quickly as you can. And from our drills, I will say that that is one of the most important things that can happen. Notification of other people in the area. What we have found in doing drills at the school and with other businesses is that gunshots don't sound like gunshots, okay? In a building, they will always be justified in our mind, that wasn't gunfire, right? That couldn't be gunfire in my building, in my school, it couldn't be. So there's just that split second of inaction that takes place, all right? What we have to do is, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we have to be suspicious, okay, of things that just aren't right, all right? So what's another way that we can counter that? That we can counter those? Yes, ma'am.
Stall them, slow them down.
Stall them, slow them down. How do we do that?
Lock doors.
Absolutely. It's exactly what I was thinking. So locking doors, hardening targets, okay? By keeping facilities secured, we do that. We prevent that person from making first contact with that first person they're going to injure, okay? So we harden targets. Those are all of the planning steps that we take when we go and we talk to the schools and we talk to businesses. What have you done to harden your facility? What have you done to train your employees or your students or your staff, right? Those are just some of the ways that we can do that. So 3 to 5 minutes, that's when you're waiting for the police to get there, is that a long time? It is, okay? I know I've waited 3 to 5 minutes for someone to come and help me before, and it was a long time, okay? So we really, really need to have practices that we can do prior to law enforcement getting there. Okay, so this is just a couple of quick slides just to throw in there of what kind of things that we're facing, okay? I don't think I need to tell anyone in here what types of incidents we've seen over the last few years. So I wanted to point something out. These are some of the light reading things that I engage myself in, okay? These are after action reports, all right? One is from San Bernardino, another one's from Virginia Tech. The one on the top is from Newtown, Connecticut. That's what I engage myself in. I read about this stuff so that I can plan a better tactical response if something ever happened here. So no one needs to inform the police about this, but this is just some of the things that we're facing, okay? So these things come directly from the FBI, okay? So in 2000, there was only one mass shooting that was reported, and now here as 2016, that's the last year that data was available, we had 20. There's been a general uptick in those as we've gone over the last 18 years, as we all know, right? So, just some of the places that things take place. All right, we always think of schools because those are the most dramatic and we all really, really value our children, right? But commerce is the largest, makes up the largest share of where these things take place, okay? 45% of all the shootings take place in commerce. So as the chief said, this doesn't apply just to schools, okay? This applies to everyone in their daily lives. Aurora, Colorado, where did that take place? Does anybody know that? Movie theater, okay? Always, it's a different place all the time, all right? Wherever there's general access to people, that can be a problem. Are we always facing an outside threat from someone we don't know? Could it be somebody we know? Has anyone in here ever worked with someone who they thought just wasn't right? right? And not that they were off mentally. I'm just saying they were experiencing events in their lives that they were under some stress. Has anybody ever worked with someone like that? I have. Okay? Those are the types of folks that we need to be concerned about. All right? And there's ways as business owners and as employees along with that person that we can address those types of things prior to something happening. Okay? So commerce is the largest one. Education's at 25%. Those are very popular. Okay, so see something, say something. So in this section, this is all about doing something ahead of time, which is what we were just saying. If we can prevent one of these from happening, isn't that better than having to worry about all this other stuff we're going to talk about later on tonight? It's better for us to be able to prevent it. So if we can actually notice something ahead of time, maybe we can actually do something. We can report it to the right people, report it to the police, report it to the principals so that it happens, things get taken care of prior to that. Okay? So we're going to show you this video. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a little bit of a test for you all, and then we'll discuss it once we're done. Can I get the lights back there?
Here's your challenge. How many times is the yellow backpack passed? Go. So the yellow backpack was passed 17 times. But how aware were you? Did you notice that our scene moved outside? What about the student who put on a hat and switched books? Or the woman dropping the suspicious package? Sometimes it's easy to miss the obvious. Your next challenge, be aware of your surroundings. If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so who got the 17? Everybody get 17? Did everybody get all of the things that he listed? It's tough, right? I think I've watched that video about 20 times now, and I can't pick it all up either. There's just too many things that are going on. Can I get the lights back there for him? The point is that we go about our daily lives, right? And we see all types of things going on around us. Sometimes we're so engaged in what we're doing that we forget about whatever else is going on around us. That's a bad thing, okay? So in order to be safer, we actually need to notice things prior to them happening, right? So this video focuses on a suspicious package. Well, what if it had been a suspicious person standing there who was now pulling out some type of firearm to shoot at the rest of the people that are walking by? Those are the types of things that we need to look ahead of time. That person who's going to stand there and is ready to do their deed or whatever they're interested in doing that they planned out in their mind, are they going to be going through any kind of stress? Do you think they're going to be stressed out? Absolutely. Yeah, they are. So, are we going to be able to notice any of that kind of stress? Somebody standing there really fidgety? Okay? That's the type of things that we would like you to call the police for. Okay? Those are the types of things. So this card here there's actually cards out here that we left. I'm not sure whether you got those on the way in or not, but that's an exact copy of that. This is a card that's put out by the local VIC, the Vermont Information Center, and they're handling these types of tips. Okay? So these are the types of things that you want to be able to notice. All right? Who or what you saw, be able to describe it. And those are pretty fast. That video was really fast. So it may be hard to do that, but try to notice what you can and make a note of it in your mind. All right? When did you see it? That could be important for us to know exactly when. Was it 2 days ago or was it 2 minutes ago? All right? That's kind of important. Where did it happen? So we need to know exactly where it happened, what's going on. Where did you see this? And why? What about it is suspicious? Okay? We get calls all the time from people that say there's a suspicious person walking in my neighborhood. Why are they suspicious? What makes them suspicious? So we want to know that because not only for our safety, okay, but for yours. Because they might be really suspicious because they just don't live there, or they might be really suspicious because they're carrying this package that they shouldn't be. Ask the folks down in Austin, Texas if they're nervous right now, right? And following that story. So those are some of the things that we want to know. Now, to follow along with this, there's a website out there called speakup.com. This website is focused towards young people to be able to anonymously talk to people. They have counselors on staff that are ready to talk to, for them to talk to, if they see suspicious activity at their school. Now, I would encourage folks and kids to go and talk to their principal or their teacher or their guidance counselor or their SROs. I see them sitting back there, okay? Those are our biggest assets in the schools, okay? Go and build that trust with them. Go and talk to the people that you know and trust, even your mom and dad, okay? Go back and talk to them about what you saw and what's concerning you about that friend of yours who's suddenly putting things on Snapchat that he shouldn't.
Can you talk a little bit more about that with social media?
Yep.
That, I don't know if you're going to get to that, but
Sure.
I'm really curious about how we can be better aware of not only what we're seeing on social media, but what our kids are seeing on social media and make them comfortable
Absolutely.
about it.
Absolutely. So on social media is a whole different animal, as we know. These days, I mean, it's everywhere. So what we have to be able to do as parents is we have to be able to monitor that, okay? There may be things going on that you don't know about. I mean, anybody in here ever did anything they didn't tell their mom and dad about? Right? Everyone did, okay? But the mom and dad, if you're paying attention, you know when something's right and what's wrong, okay? My mother always did. She knew when something was going on. So we all have those instincts. Something's just not right, okay? So what I would say as far as social media is do your best to keep an eye on what they're doing. Limit the amount that they use that. Monitor their friends on there just like you do monitor their normal friends that they go and play with every day. That's what I would tell you about that. But it's a very pervasive type of media that they're using, okay?
What would you tell teens to keep an eye out for? Like are there certain types of pictures or things like that if they see those things crop up
Sure.
with their friends that...
So I would say looking and noticing statements that are just out of the ordinary. You know, the kid is normally a very happy child talking about school, talking about this class, and this is what happened on the playground today. And all of a sudden they just start changing to a really dark, depressing type of speech. Just seeing changes in their behavior. That's the things that I would tell my kids to look for, is just changes in their friends that just aren't there. Because they know them the best. They know their friends and who they are from day to day. We all do. We all know our friends and how they act day to day. If something's different, we can tell that. They can tell, and they're the best judges of that. So that's what I would do.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so personal preparation. So as we were talking about, so be aware of your environment and possible dangers. Okay, walking around, as a lot of us do sometimes, in our phone, okay, is not the smartest thing to do, right? We all know it, but we still do it because it's so hard to put down. But be aware of your environment, okay? When I asked my wife, she's here tonight, my head's on a swivel when we're out walking, when we're out, okay? It's on a swivel. It's just the things I think about. And it's unfortunately that I think like that, but everyone needs to be, not maybe that vigilant, but they need to be thinking about their own personal safety, okay? Just thinking about it. Noticing things that are different, okay? So wherever you are, take note of the 2 nearest exits in any facility, okay? Where are the exits here? Right there, right? Okay, there's numerous ones in this building, but those are the 2 out of here. Anywhere you go, movie theater, you should know where the exit is. Okay, how do you get out of there quickly? Right? That's a fire safety thing too, right? So not just for this, but you should know. All right. All right. So one of these incidents happens. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview what the police's response is going to look like, so that you're not overwhelmed or anything like that if you see this going on. Okay. So the police mission at the time is to stop the shooter as soon as possible. We're trained to proceed directly to the area where the last shots were heard, okay? So on the phone, and we'll talk about 911, but on the phone or the officer who's arriving, they're going to want information, where were the last shots heard? Are they still going on at this point? Why are we concerned about that? Because we want our officer going to that person and engaging them, okay? When I say engaging them, I mean shooting them. If they're still in an act of harming others, I want my officers to be making that person shoot at us. Because that's why we get paid, not you, okay? We get paid to be shot at, you don't. So we want our guys to be engaging that person, and while they're engaging us, they're not taking out innocent civilians. So that's why we're trained the way we are. And things have changed, just like the chief said, over the years, they have changed dramatically in how we respond to these things. And I'm sure even after Parkland and some of the recent events that we've had, I'm sure there'll be more tactics coming down the road. That's why I read the things that I do, to see what law enforcement agencies did right, did wrong, those types of things, because we can always learn. All right, so the first officer is going to respond directly to the threat. So a lot of those officers, most of our officers now are dressed in, the blue uniforms we have in the back, and like I'm wearing, but they may be putting on helmets and external bulletproof vests that may look like military equipment. Okay, it looks a lot like that. So that they may have, rifles, shotguns, handguns. It doesn't matter. We're going to bring what we need, because we need to take care of things at that point. So we're going to shout commands and may push individuals to the ground for safety. This is not the time for officer friendly. Okay, not the time. We're going to be under a little stress also, as you can imagine. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to that person who's causing the damage. That's what we're trying to do. All right, so your response when you encounter the police in one of these. So I always laugh because a lot of this comes from the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm not sure who's actually writing this stuff, but remain calm. Okay? Remain calm, right? There's nothing to see here. So try to do the best you can, but follow the officer's instructions, okay? Just follow what they're telling you to do. So put down items in your hand. We don't want to see you with things in your hands. That makes us really nervous. Understand at that point, we are responding to a person who's trying to harm others, and we don't know who that person is at that point, okay? Or if there's more persons. There may be others. Raise your hands and spread your fingers out. That way we can see. If we see hands that are safe, then we know that we're going to be safe. That's what we're trying to do. Keep your hands visible at all the time. And avoid making quick movements towards the officer, such as holding on to them for safety. That may be a natural thing for somebody to do. Try to attach yourself to the person who's there to try to help you. We're going to probably push you off because we need to get to where we're going to take care of that business. Okay? Avoid pointing, screaming, or yelling. Yeah, right. Sure. Okay, I think there's going to be some pointing, there might be some screaming, and there's definitely going to be some yelling. Okay? But we do the best that we can. So don't try to stop the officers and ask them for help or directions when evacuating. Just proceed in a direction. So if we're going that way, you want to be going which way? That way, right? Because that's the safe direction. So one of the things that we have done here as part of our pre-planning is also coordinate with the fire department. We learned this from a police department in Texas, in which they use fire trucks as places for people to run to. Why? They're big and they're red, usually, or some other bright color. And there's usually staffed by somebody who knows what they're doing and is of some authority, okay? So if we're telling people run to the fire truck, they're going to run to that place so that they can gather up to wherever they need to go from there. What else is a fire truck?
Barrier.
Really good barrier, right? Should stop bullets. Matt, where'd he go? He left. There he is. Will it stop bullets, Matt? See? That's why we're using them. Okay? So, some information for 911. Location of the active shooter. Like I said, we want to know where that person is. All right? We want to know where the last time that the person was seen or persons were seen. The number of shooters, if there's more than one. We always talk about in firearms training. Wolves travel in packs. Okay? We never believe, even though a lot of the shootings that we've had have been by single individuals, there's always that chance, and there have been others, Columbine being the first one, that have been engaged by 2 or more people. Okay, so we are always concerned about that. So we want to know. The physical description of the shooters, that's very important for us. We don't want to engage people that we shouldn't be. We want to get innocent people out of there and actually get to the active. The number and type of weapons held by the shooters, we want to know that, because if the person has a rifle, that makes a big difference for us in our response. Obviously, we're going to bring the biggest weapons that we have, but if the person is carrying a rifle, that means they're more danger to us from a longer distance, okay? So we want to know those types of things. Number of potential victims, that's important for EMS, okay? They need to know what kind of resources that they're going to need. All right, so some of the actions that you can take, and this is just the model that we're using, run, hide, fight. And it's very easy to remember, that's why we're using it. And it gives you options in what to do in one of these. Okay, so we'll go through each one of them here, and we'll talk about them. So first up is run. If you can get out of somewhere, go. If the shooter is not in your direct area, and you're not under fire at that point, or he's not in your area and going to find you easily, leave. Get out of the area. Go somewhere safe. Okay? Run to that fire truck. Run to a friend's house. You know, somewhere where you're going to be safe. Okay? So if you can get out, do it. Have an escape route and a plan in mind. So this may not always be possible in everyday life, but we all go to the same places every day, don't we? We go to work, or we go home. You ever gone through your house and figured out how you would escape from it if you needed to? How about your place of employment? So I charge each person in here to go back to your place of employment tomorrow and start looking around to see how you would escape from that building if you needed to. Know where the exits are, right? Okay, so evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. So you may have people that will tell you, no, I'm not doing that, I'm too scared, I'm going to stay here. You don't want to stick around while they try to make up their mind. You need to leave, okay? You need to go. Leave your belongings behind. That's going to prevent you from having things in your hands, right? It's your coach purse or, God forbid, your briefcase, that can be replaced. You can't, all right? We can get back in there and get that stuff for you, all right? So help others escape if possible. If you are working in a workplace and people come to your workplace as part of their course of their day, such as here at City Hall, we have folks coming in and out all the time. When they come into this building, are we responsible for their safety? Yeah, okay, we need to know how to help them. We need to make sure that we know how to get them out of the building and help them hide, okay? As the chief was saying at the grocery store, sticking you in the small room. Okay, so what's your next option? And I want to reiterate, these are options, okay? This is not a continuum, these are options. These are based on your best information, all right? So hide. So if an evacuation is possible, you just can't get out, or the shooter may be in the area where you're at, and it's impossible to get by there, or you're just too scared to run. Hide, okay? So find a place to hide where they're not going to find you, all right? Be out of the active shooter's view. Provide protection. You want a place that will provide you protection. It doesn't have to be a bulletproof room, but certainly if anyone in here work in an office that has like lots of file cabinets. So I'm thinking of the clerks upstairs because we did this training with them, and one of the clerks actually went back to her office and identified all these files that she had. She goes, oh, those will stop bullets. And she had a little hide in there and everything. So she doesn't work there anymore, but anyway. So I'd like you to go back and look at your office and try to figure out where, or your home, figure out what will stop bullets and what won't, okay? It's important for you to know that. You want someplace that's going to provide you protection. You don't want anywhere that's going to trap you in there, such as a freezer or something like that. I've had people say that to me before, or a vault. But what if I just go in the vault and lock myself in there? Good luck, because I don't know how I'm going to be able to get you out of there. But so you don't want a place like that, okay? You want somewhere that you can get out of relatively quickly. Lock the door behind you and then block it with heavy furniture, all right? You're trying to prevent that person from actually getting in there where you're at and finding you. All right, the last part is fight. And this is usually the most controversial section of this, okay? And people have asked us before, it's like, well, you're going to train me how to do karate and take people out. That's not what we're talking about. Fight is essentially a last resort for you to take action when your life is in danger, okay? All the other options have been exhausted. You can't run, you can't hide. Or what I would tell you to do is, I don't want you to just sit there and let a person harm you. I'd like you to do something. It doesn't mean that you're going to actively kill that person or harm them, physically injure them, but you might be able to distract them long enough where you can leave the area and they can't get to you. It has happened in some of the incidents that we have had, where people have been able to distract the person long enough where they've been able to escape. So that's what we're talking about when fight. We're talking about when it's as a last option, when your life is in danger and you There's no other way for you to do it, to do anything other than that. Don't just lay there and let somebody harm you. Do something. Go down fighting, okay? Do something. Okay, so we're gonna, oh, hang on just one second.
Sorry, question. But one of the natural responses when people are afraid is to freeze.
Yep, exactly.
So what do you recommend to avoid something like that natural response happening?
So I will tell you that in training other police officers, the best way to prevent yourself from freezing is having training ahead of time and doing the what if game, or actually when this happens, I'm going to do this, okay? So when this happens, I'm going to do this. So in my mind, I'm thinking when a shooter walks through this door, I'm going to do this. That is the best way that we can train somebody to prevent them from freezing, because they've had experience ahead of time and they have a bit of a plan in their mind. That's what I would say. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Hey, light, sir.
40 years ago, it was unimaginable. 20 years ago, it was unthinkable. Today, it is our reality.
As a teacher or staff member of the Santa Ana Unified School District, you have only one mission during an active shooter event: to do whatever is necessary for you and your students to survive.
Now you remember from our reading, we should think of our schools in the same way we think of our communities. Teachers, staff, and students all working together to keep a watchful eye for anything out of the ordinary. This neighborhood watch approach to campus security is vital. If we see anything that appears suspicious, we need to report it. It could be as simple as noticing that a door is propped open when it should be closed and locked. Or it could be more complicated, perceiving sudden mood swings or aggressive behavior in a coworker or student. Either way, these concerns must be corrected immediately or reported for further assessment.
When an active shooter attacks a campus, realize that as teachers and staff, we are the first responders. In those crucial moments between the start of the assault and the arrival of law enforcement, we must adopt a survival mindset. We need to seize the initiative and decide what actions to take and when to take them. Here are 3 effective strategies to counter an active shooter assault. We can run, we can hide, we can fight. Don't think of these as progressive steps. First I run, and then I hide, and finally I fight. Think of them instead as options that best suit your particular situation and location during the assault. An active shooter on a school campus is in search of targets. We want to use run, hide, and fight to undermine that objective. For example, the distance of some individuals to the shooter will safely allow a strategy of run in order to make their escape. Other people may adopt a strategy of hide to build a barricade and take cover in a secured room. Still others, primarily due to their close proximity to the shooter, may have no alternative but to fight. If you have the chance to safely leave the school grounds, the run strategy should be your first course of action. Run takes you out of harm's way and puts distance between you and the shooter. Keep everyone together throughout your escape. If you meet others, take them with you as you exit, but do not stay behind if they will not go. If the location of the active shooter is not known or is too close for you to escape, then the hide strategy may be your better option. Hide is very similar to our policy of lockdown. Doors should be locked, windows closed and covered, lights turned out, and cell phones turned off with everyone remaining quiet. If necessary, impromptu barricades or other means of cover should be employed. Hiding involves seeking concealment in as secure a location as possible, out of the shooter's view. The intent of the hide strategy is to induce the shooter to bypass your area.
or restrict his entry and further frustrate his intent. Fight is a strategy of last resort. Use it only when your life is in immediate danger and no other options are available to you. To be effective, our actions must involve concentrated use of our strength, quickness, and aggression. Remember, fight is not about heroics, it's about survival. Use defensive tools such as chairs, textbooks, fire extinguishers, or other items to disrupt or stop the shooter. No single response will fit all active shooter situations. In some cases, you'll use one strategy to buy time for another. For example, building a barricade to slow the active shooter while you make your escape by breaking a window and exiting. Contact law enforcement only when it is safe to do so. Never presume that someone else has already made the call. Law enforcement will speed to your campus in force. Their sole concern will be to quickly neutralize the shooter. When you encounter officers, try your best to remain calm and obey their commands. Active shooter attacks unfold quickly. There may not be opportunity for an announcement to the school's public address system. Notification may in fact come from the sounds of gunfire, screams, and voices in distress. Always be on the alert. The truth is that an active shooter attack on campus is likely to be the most frightening experience of your life. The more we plan and prepare, the more we practice and drill these plans, the more automatic our response will be. Begin now by developing a run, hide, and fight action plan. A physical inventory of your classroom will identify possible escape routes, items useful for barricade construction, defensive tools, and potential hiding places. Discuss your plan with fellow teachers, staff members, and administrators. Involve members of law enforcement. Prepare plans for common areas, hallways, playgrounds, lunch areas, gymnasiums, and the library. Because we don't know where we might be during an attack, we need to be thorough in our planning.
So we'll cover windows, turn off all the
Communicate these plans to your students. Rehearse, practice, and drill each plan on a regular basis, the same way you currently do for fires or other emergencies. Make sure everyone knows what they need to do if an active shooter strikes.
And let's get the blinds on the window.
We hope that no teacher anywhere ever has to put these efforts into action. But hope is not a strategy. Preparedness is. As a teacher and staff member, you must take a leadership role in preparing yourself and your students to respond during an active shooter attack. And the time to begin these preparations is now.
Okay, so we have one more video similar to that to show you here. You can leave the lights down. I'm going to show it right now. It's very similar, but we just wanted to give you a different perspective on what's happened around the country in preparations that have taken place.
Hello, my name is Jess Bernhardt. I'm a police officer at the University of Iowa. I'm currently assigned to Day Watch Patrol, but I also teach a very important part of Hawkeye safety, violent incident survival training. The training that I've received over the last 15 years has allowed me to speak about things such as active shooters and violent incidents. What we've learned from the training and from the actual events is that the public was not prepared. Today, I hope to give you a little bit more to put in your toolbox. Run, hide, fight. The first thing is run. When it's safe to do so, get out of the building. Remove yourself from the equation. If you encounter people along your path out of the building, try to get them to come with you, but do not let them slow you down. Every second counts. Once in a relatively safe location, check yourself for injuries. Call 911 and tell us what you've seen. Next, hide. Block the doors, tie them shut, barricade, use anything in your power to lock the doors and make it harder for the shooter or person wanting to hurt you to get in. Turn off lights, silence phones, and hide. Get yourself away from the door so the attacker cannot see you. Your last resort is to fight. Grab something heavy you can use to distract the attacker. Disorient them and be prepared to fight. When we've arrived on scene, our priority will be to stop the attacker. Don't hold weapons. If you've seen something, tell us. If someone has been injured, help them. Use tourniquets to stop bleeding and direct pressure. Stay locked down until the threat has been removed. The best way to stay safe is to do your part to prevent an incident before the attack occurs. By reporting strange and concerning behavior, here on campus, we have several tools at your disposal to help you report anonymously.
Okay, can I get the lights, please? All right, so both of those videos focus on schools, which is very, very important. But a lot of the concepts in that also apply to everyday life, and they also apply to businesses. So go back to your businesses, make sure that you know where their hiding places, where the exits are. Identify items in your office or wherever it is that you can use to defend yourself. Okay, just some of the things that you can think about. Okay, so we've talked about what we do, you know, when all of this happens, but how can we recognize someone's potential for violence so that we can get, so that we can prevent it from happening altogether. So employees, if you have employees or even other, you know, we talked earlier about what do we look for on social media, okay? How about, you know, increased use of alcohol or illegal drugs? Kid at school suddenly starts looking and you know, into the drug culture. You know, they're suddenly with a different clique of kids that they've never acted or been with before. Okay, things like that. So an adult, increased use of alcohol or illegal drugs, unexplained increase in absenteeisms, vague physical complaints. Okay, just things that don't make sense. They look like they might be depressed or have some type of withdrawal from society. Right? Things that we're looking for. This applies for kids or adults. Resistance or overreaction to changes in policy and procedures. Someone who just flips out because you suddenly change the time that they have to come in the morning. They got to be there 5 minutes earlier and they just lose it. Okay? Something like that. Violations of school or company policies. Another thing that you can look for, an increased severe mood swings. You know, we all know the folks that we work with, but the kids all know the kids that they go to school with, and they know how they're supposed to act, right? Noticeably unstable and emotional responses or explosive outbursts of anger or rage without provocation, right? Those are just some of the things that we should be asking about, or if we're noticing, maybe pulling that person in and saying, hey, is everything okay? Or sending that kid to the guidance counselor and making sure everything's all right. And you know, preventing this type of thing from ever becoming a problem. All right, so others, an angry outburst, directed threats. So someone comes into your office, they come into your school, you know, they're having angry outbursts, they're directing threats towards you, they're actually saying, I'm going to do this to you, okay? That's the time when you need to be calling the police, okay? Calling us and letting us come and take care of that. Clenching their fists, removing their clothing, they're getting ready to fight, okay? People sometimes when they get ready to fight, they'll remove their hats because they don't want anything to happen to their prize hat, right? That type of thing. Loosening up, you know, you see them start, you know, I'm getting loose, I'm gonna start a fight here. You know, we all know that type of behavior, we've seen it before. Clothing that doesn't match the weather. Someone comes walking into the school or into your business wearing a longer coat that they should be wearing in January when it's actually June. All right, that's a suspicious behavior we need to know about because they could be concealing stuff underneath that coat. All right, remember what we talked about? It's all about noticing things, being aware of your surroundings. And then finally, making statements that don't make sense. This is a sign of somebody who might be mentally ill or something like that, and that's one of the indicators for violence. Bags that look out of place, they shouldn't be there. The lady with the package in the video that we saw, right? Okay, so that's all I have in this part of the presentation. I think we said we were going to hold questions until the end. So right now I'm going to introduce Billy Smith. He's a paramedic with AmCare Ambulance, and he's going to talk some things that you can do to help folks that have been victims during these types of incidents.
Good evening. So we're going to talk about what happens after the run, hide, fight. What happens after an incident actually happens. We're going to talk a little bit about stopping the bleed, self-preservation, taking care of yourself and others. Something that general public doesn't think about, right? When you guys have an issue, you call 911, right? And people come wearing a uniform like I do, and we take care of that. And we bring them to the hospital, and they continue that. What we're going to talk about tonight is what you can do in the meantime. How long does it take somebody to bleed out? How long does it take somebody to bleed?
5 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes from a femoral artery, right? How long is it going to take an ambulance to respond to you?
20.
Think about where you work. How long does it take an ambulance to get you while you're there? 2 minutes, right? Okay. So why am I up here talking about this? Well, as Captain Hogue said, I am a paramedic with AmCare, and I am also an embedded medic with the Northwest Special Response Team. So I work with Captain Hogue and his team as their embedded medic. So I do a lot of training on the tactical medicine, what to do when the bad stuff happens. So what we're going to do right now is actually we have about a 5-minute video we're going to show you on Stop the Bleed, and we'll have some demonstrations on tourniquet use and a few other applications.
Did you know that traumatic injuries are the leading cause of death for people under age 40? And that some of these deaths are preventable? Blood loss is responsible for 35% of pre-hospital deaths. And during mass casualty events such as shootings, 80% of victims are delivered to hospitals by someone other than a trained ambulance crew. Severe bleeding can lead to death in 5 minutes or less. Many people perish before an ambulance can arrive. But it doesn't have to be this way. It's time to stop the bleed. And you can be part of it. Stop the Bleed is a White House initiative that provides people like you with tools they need to take action against life-threatening wounds. In this brief video, we'll show you how to get involved.
Everything was so normal. We were just going about our day, minding our business. But then there was this noise, like a loud pop. People were running and screaming, and then I saw people just lying on the ground, bleeding.
What if this happened to you? Would you know what to do? Here are some initial pointers. Act quickly. What you do in the first few minutes is critical. Evaluate your safety. Is it safe for you to remain where you are? If not, evacuate the area. Tell someone to call 911. Apply pressure. Pressure is what stops bleeding. Let's explore the concept of pressure more. There are two basic kinds of pressure: direct pressure and pressure applied via a tourniquet. There are two main ways to tell whether bleeding is serious enough to require a tourniquet: the volume of blood and the flow. Volume refers to the amount of blood present. Think about a soda can. Cut that amount in half. If that amount of blood is present, then it's serious life-threatening bleeding. Another warning sign is flow. If the blood is squirting, pooling on the surface, or if it's flowing continuously, then it's serious life-threatening bleeding. In a real-life scenario, you'd evaluate the volume and flow of blood to help you make decisions.
This person's arm is injured, but it looks like neither the volume nor the flow of blood indicates we need a tourniquet. We need direct pressure instead. You, call 911. This person's injuries are more severe. There's more blood than half a soda can, and it's flowing really fast. That means I need to use a tourniquet to apply pressure.
So you've decided you need a tourniquet. What next? You need to find or make one. Two basic types of tourniquets are out there: commercial and makeshift. Commercial tourniquets are the most effective. If you're in a public facility, you may be able to find one in a bleeding control kit, often found near an AED display. If that's not an option, apply strong pressure with your hands, or use available materials like a t-shirt or towel. Tourniquets are used for severe bleeding on arms and legs, not other parts of the body. The key idea is only the limbs. Apply direct pressure to stop bleeding on other parts of the body. In this video, we'll focus on pressure applied via a commercial tourniquet. Place the tourniquet 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Be careful to place it above the injury, not directly on top of it. Then, simply pull, twist, and clip. Pull the free end of the Velcro strap, thread it through the buckle, and securely fasten it back onto itself. Twist the rod until the bleeding stops, or until you can't twist anymore. Note that this step will be painful for the injured person. Be persistent. Be sure that the bleeding stops. Clip the rod with the small Velcro strap, securing it so that it doesn't untwist. If bleeding continues and you've tightened the tourniquet as much as you can apply a second tourniquet above the first, closer to the torso. Although applying the tourniquet is simple, watch out for these common mistakes. Mistake number 1, not knowing when to apply a tourniquet. Tourniquets aren't appropriate for all injuries. Don't use it for a minor injury or on the trunk of the body. But for life-threatening bleeding on the arms and legs, don't be afraid to use a tourniquet. Mistake number 2, not tightening the tourniquet enough to stop bleeding. Also, remember to keep twisting until bleeding stops. If it doesn't stop, add a second tourniquet closer to the torso, above the first tourniquet. Mistake number 3, placing the tourniquet directly on top of the wound. The tourniquet should go just above the wound, on the side closest to the torso. Mistake number 4, loosening the tourniquet. Leave the tourniquet on until medical professionals arrive. Even if the victim complains of pain, the victim could bleed to death quickly if the tourniquet is removed. Hopefully you'll never have to apply a tourniquet, but knowing how can save a life. Thanks for helping stop the bleed. This message was brought to you by the National Center for Disaster Medicine and Public Health at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences.
Thank you. Can we have the lights? How many have put a tourniquet on or had one put on in training or real life? Does it hurt? Does it hurt? When put on properly, it will hurt, okay? That's one thing that they put in this video. So when the person you're putting this on is saying it hurts, it's going to hurt. And if you're putting it on yourself, sometimes we don't like to have that pain, right? You're going to need to do that. It's going to hurt. How many people remember the day when we didn't see AEDs around? Right? When we didn't see them everywhere. Where do we see them now? Everywhere. Right? And so one of the initiatives to stop the bleed is getting these bleeding control kits in the same places. Right? Teaching everybody out there what to do. So right now we're going to do a quick demonstration on putting a tourniquet on. So if everyone can go to their places, please. And Pam, please come here with me. So around the room there's going to be some people from Northwest Medical Center and Amcare Ambulance. So you don't necessarily have to watch me up here. They're going to be doing the exact same thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to be doing this without the microphone. So if you guys can't hear me, please speak up and then we'll bring somebody up to hold the microphone for us. Never mind, the captain is on his way. Okay, so you approach somebody that's bleeding. So part of the fight in Run, Hide, Fight, Chief and I talked about this today. Part of the fight in Run, Hide, Fight is fighting for your life, correct? And fighting for your life doesn't necessarily mean fighting in the assailant. Can everybody hear me? Anybody not hear me? Good. So it doesn't necessarily mean fighting the active shooter, but fighting for your life. And part of fighting for your life is self-preservation. Okay? So let's talk about putting a tourniquet on or bleeding. So we're all going to go with Pam's left arm. This is the one that is actually bleeding, and we're going to go high so everyone can see it. Tourniquets come in different colors, so you're going to see different colors around here, and we can explain that later on why at the back table. So she's bleeding. One of the things you want to do is apply pressure. If you can apply pressure yourself, have them apply pressure. Can you please hold pressure right here where you're bleeding? While they're doing that, you can get the tourniquet ready. So open the tourniquet up and stretch it out. Okay? And if you see everyone else, they're doing the same thing. Stretch it out. Velcro side, non-Velcro side. You want the non-Velcro side against the body. Put it in. Wrap it around the limb. 2 to 3 inches above the injury. Okay? If you go a little bit higher than that, no harm, no foul. Okay? No one's going to get a measuring tape and measure this afterwards. Put it through the buckle. You only have to go through one buckle. Get it as tight as you can that way. Please lift your arm. And then wrap it around on the Velcro, not over the windlass. Have this on the outside of the body. This is the part where we talk about twisting. We are not going to twist it tight enough to cut off circulation here tonight, but we're going to tighten it and lock it back down on itself. You're going to do that until bleeding stops. And if you can go just a little bit more, it's okay. If bleeding stops, you're only halfway through, continue around, don't back up. Continue around, lock it in place. You're going to have this long tail out here. Wrap this tail back around. And then there's a lock right here, locks down in place. Not all of you can see this, but you can see it when we talk about it later. The white thing says time on it. If you have the ability, mark what time you put this tourniquet on. Very important when we get to the hospital. Do not do anything to remove this tourniquet after that. Okay? Any questions about that? We'll talk about it later.
I'm just curious about what happens to the arm when you cut off the blood. I mean, that would be my concern.
So, yes, we are cutting off blood supply, but what doesn't happen if I don't cut off blood supply to this arm?
Bleed out.
Right? The individual is going to die. So, is there a possibility that we cut off all circulation and she might lose feeling, have nerve damage, or even lose the limb? It is possible. It is possible. However, there have been studies and cases that show the amount of time that you're going to have this tourniquet on, the chances of that are very slim. Okay, so if this is happening in an active shooter, they're over in how long? 3 to 5 minutes? Am I going to be able to get to her as an EMS provider, get her to surgical care in less than an hour? So it's probably not going to be on there a long time. So yeah, you are cutting off circulation. She is cutting off. You are cutting off circulation, but definitely better than the alternative.
What about clothing? How much is okay to stay on versus how much should you be removing?
The amount of clothing she has on is fine. If you're wearing a big down jacket, it's best to try to remove it. If you can't, you can just get this as tight as you can and tighten it down. But try to remove clothing if you can. You might not have that option. So I wouldn't sit there and mess around a lot in trying to get the clothing off because time, right? Get it on, get it tight. Sir?
You told us that we can expect it to hurt. Do you tell the person you are life saving, you reassure them, say, I know this is going to hurt, but this will save your life?
Absolutely. Talk to them. Talk to them. You know, that can be the best thing. When you're putting this on, and let them know this is probably going to hurt. Yes. Okay. So that's a demonstration on tourniquet. We're going to have it later. The next demonstration. So where did we say we put the tourniquets? Limbs only, right? So what if Pam is bleeding up under her armpit right here? Is this going to work? No. No. So there's other options. Pressure and what we call some wound packing. We're just going to show you real quickly how wound packing works. What saved lives in Vegas was improvised tourniquets and improvised wound packing. Okay, there was some instance where there was actually, when they get to the hospital, they were pulling stalks out of wounds, but it stopped the bleeding. We'll grab the...
Do those commercial tourniquets work on a kindergartner?
Yes. So you might have to improvise a little bit, right? And that's the thing, is when you go through training on this, improvisation, but this can go down. I mean, I can make that small before I start twisting it. So yes, it can. There's different tourniquets out there. We're just using one example of a commercial. There's several out there. So again, we talked about injuries that we cannot use a tourniquet on. This is only going to be demonstrated up here, but there's going to be stations set up in the back afterwards. So if she's bleeding up here in the axillary areas, meaning under the armpit, up in the growing areas where you cannot get these tourniquets high enough, okay? This is not something you're going to do in the trunk of the body, okay? You cannot pack wounds there. It's just you can't get enough packing in there. One thing you want to do when we have an injury like this is you need to see what is bleeding. Again, something that's going to be hard for you guys to think about. But you need to get in there, find out what's bleeding, and put direct pressure on the vessel that's bleeding. What do you guys think about that? Right? Something that but if you don't practice on it, you're not going to think about it. Find the vessel that's bleeding. Get it on your thumb and get it in there. And on the vessel that's bleeding, hold pressure on that. And you're just going to continue packing until you have the full wound packed. So this might not take every bit of the sock or whatever you're using that you have. Hold it on the outside, and then you're just going to hold it here. One of the things you need to remember with this, unlike a tourniquet, once you put a tourniquet on, the tourniquet is there, you don't have to really do anything except make sure the bleeding stops, maybe retighten it. When you pack a wound, you need to hold this on there, and you're going to be holding it there for 3 to 5 minutes. And you're going to hold a lot of pressure. Okay, this isn't the time where you just grab a hold of it and hold it tight like this. You're going to be on it, and you're going to be putting a lot of pressure. And you need to be on the vessel that's bleeding. How many think they don't want to do that? I'll raise my hand high. I'll raise my hand really high. Again, tonight is not the tonight is not the full Stop the Bleed course. So the full Stop the Bleed course is a full hour of exactly what we did with a lot of hands-on. And when we go to the back table, Pam will be back there and she can help you talk about that. So at this time, again, we'll hold questions afterwards. At this time, we're going to turn this over to Pam Scott, a nurse from Northwest Medical Center.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Pamela Scott. I'm an emergency room nurse at Northwestern Medical Center. I'm also the chair of the Emergency Preparedness Committee in the ER. I'm here tonight with my team who are going to demonstrate down back the wound packing and tourniquets application. Our teams together look forward to bringing this education to your location. So there will be time where you can ask how you can sign up for these courses. Thank you.
At this time, what we will do is take questions. If you'll just raise your hand. I've got Judy, who's also got a mic, and she'll go to you. And you can just direct it to a particular person that you'd like to refer the question to. Anybody with our first question? Go ahead.
Who do we reach out to?
Hold on just one second. We want to all hear you.
Who do we reach out to get these videos?
So the videos that we played are all on YouTube. They're readily available. Like the chief said, we didn't.
If you see me, Kenny, I can make sure you get a copy of them.
Or the chief has a copy also.
They're on the internet. I have some thumb drives with them. I can certainly make them available. It depends exactly which ones you want and how you plan to use them.
Cool, I made a list.
All right.
Yep.
Next gentleman right there.
Thanks. What would you and hold it?
You told me I should.
Okay. So question around run, hide, fight, and think about a school setting with younger children and accountability. And I'm sure this would be covered in a more in-depth training, but are we empowering the children as much as the adults also to make those decisions in terms of in the classroom? Do you want that 7-year-old on their own to be deciding, well, I'm going to go out the door? So how does it work in terms of adult, student, and how that accountability and decision-making gets sorted out?
Okay. So what I would say is I would leave that up to the school administration and the parent to determine what they want to do. I know some of our folks there are people that I've talked to have said, I've told my child that they should run whenever they are in fear. But that's a very personal choice. The school's policies will also cover that, and they should discuss that ahead of time with the school to figure out what the best thing to do. Certainly 7-year-olds are going to be tough to have, running all over the place, and we have to account for everyone that is out of school, obviously. So that's a very, very tough thing to do, is to tell 7-year-olds to just run on their own. But that doesn't mean they have to run on their own. If it's part of the school's policy and what they want done, they can have the teacher have them run to a safe place also.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think that an institution or a facility doesn't really have the ability to think, to use cognitive appraisal. So the institution or facility's always got to lock down. It has to lock down because you're trying to restrict access and exposure. So what I would tell you, however, is teachers have a tremendous amount of influence, and when they're in a classroom and they can hear what's going on, and it sounds like it's far enough away, I would think that that would be the perfect time to open a window or a door or to try to get people out of there. On the other hand, it's really impossible to say if you have an actual shooting incident, what you should tell people. I can tell you that there's an after-action report that involves some very young people where they ran and they didn't have a run plan. And the people who ran weren't shot at. They survived. So that's a really tough one. It's 6, 7, 8 years old, tough age. I can tell you what I tell my granddaughter, she's 6 years old. Run, hide, or fight. Get away. We teach them stranger danger, right? When we're around Halloween and a car pulls up and says, get in, we teach our kids, our young kids, get away from them. So that's kind of what I believe as a grandparent, and that's what I told my grandkids, is get away. If you can get away, get away.
Next question.
This is Jake, you can probably hear, but another location would be water. We've got a lot of water around, whether it's the river or the bay, just as a potential place for danger to be thinking about.
I was just curious what your stance on like elderly living facilities and hospitals, things where the staff is going to be reluctant to leave patients or so on.
Yeah, we've also thought of those types of facilities. We have several here in town. That's also it's going to be a policy of the agency that's running the place. Obviously, they need to think about how they're going to make those folks ambulatory or enough to be able to move, if they can. If that's not an option, obviously, if they're not capable of running, what's their next option? To hide. So they need to be able to harden that facility so that they can make sure that someone isn't going to be able to get in there. They're very limited. One of the discussions that we've had recently is with Northwestern Medical Center about if they were to have someone there at their facility, how would they handle that? That is a very difficult question because they have folks that are there for care that can't be moved. So how do they prepare for that? Not only that, but where's the most likely spot where they would have trouble in a hospital? Emergency room, right? So we've been trying to think about if you have a problem in your emergency room, now we're going to shut that down. How are you going to handle incoming patients? So it's an in-depth discussion. It really is, and there's a lot of problems that go along with every single different agency that we deal with.
Here's something to think about. So I want to tell you something I didn't tell you in the beginning about where Run, Hide, Fight comes from. Run, Hide, Fight is a model program that was fashioned after an NFPA program in the 1950s. So what do you do if your clothes catch on fire? Everybody knows that, right? Well, it's the same principle. Run, hide, fight. I know it's not perfect. People are intimidated about using the term fight. Schools don't like it. If you do much research, you'll see that there's some opposition to the term fight. But this is what I'm telling you about fight. Fight to me means fight for your life. Fight to survive. It doesn't mean execute the best judo move you ever learned. It doesn't mean any of that. What it means is do something rather than nothing, like the captain said. There are videos available of actual incidents where people hid in plain sight and did nothing to get away or protect themselves, thinking that they could negotiate with the shooter, and they were summarily executed. So we're saying, get away. Run, hide, fight isn't perfect. It's easy to remember. You can tell somebody 7 years old, run, hide, fight, or you can tell somebody 70 years old to run, hide, fight. I think some of the other models that are being used, it's hard to remember what the acronym means, and even if you remember it, it's hard to explain certain facets of it. That's just my opinion. So, go ahead, sir.
We can fight without words.
Correct. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm pretty loud, but...
That's all right.
All right. Yes. So our officers currently stationed at the city and town elementary schools and at BFA. There is an officer that is stationed during the day in each of those schools, or is that not true?
There's a short answer and a longer one. There are 2 SROs in St. Albans. Because of funding, there is not an SRO at every school. They are at the schools where they are funded. We do have, as a matter of protocol, a policy at the police department, particularly in light of recent events, that if they're not on a call when it's time for school to begin in the morning or it's time for the students to be released, that they put some FaceTime in at the school. So at the schools, they put them, not the same one, obviously. But no, there's not an SRO at every school.
Okay, I have a follow-up. The officer, the captain, mentioned that the procedures in Florida, you looked at those and they made some mistakes. They didn't, they stayed outside the school apparently and didn't go in to confront the shooter, apparently. Got that correctly from the news coverage I watched.
We're hearing that. We haven't seen the after-action report.
That's what I thought. If that's the case, it's certainly unfortunate, tragic. But as our chief of police, Chief Taylor, would you make a promise to everybody here in the community that your officers are going to engage? They are going to engage, in an active shooter situation. They're not going to wait outside for backup. I mean,
I gladly make that promise to you. We've had those conversations. Anybody who works for me who wouldn't go in would be summarily dismissed for cowardice.
Thank you.
Gentleman over there.
I just have a question of how your training and procedures pertain to maybe domestic violence situations and how that can potentially spill out into the community and or in front of a school or in the community in general.
We think about that a lot. If you think about the actual shooting that occurred in Essex, Vermont, it was really a domestic. And I worked in Essex for 25 years. I used to participate in some of the emergency management training. And if I had put together a training that would have put 3 different sites or locations that close in proximity in that time frame, everybody would have claimed foul and said never going to happen. It did happen. And that was a domestic. We worry about domestics more than we worry about other reasons. There are a million reasons for a domestic to turn bad, and there are locations where the risk is greater than others. And I would tell you that schools are one of them. And we have these conversations with our principals, with the superintendent's office, and we do everything we can to be as prepared as we can. And the reality is, if we've had, I don't know how many lockdown, how many times we've gone into lockdown as not a drill, but I think it's all been related to domestic situations.
Sorry, just a follow-up to that. What would your precautions be surrounding domestic violence? So, it's just precautions. Like, what are your steps to ensure safety around, say, someone that just got out of jail or a victim that just got a restraining order and the person may or may not be violent, but the what if? So how do you go about protecting the victim and the community?
Well, it's kind of the same things that you've heard here tonight about being aware of your surroundings, calling the police immediately when you hear something or something starts to happen. Remember what domestic means. It involves a lot of different things. It is relationships. And the reason that domestics are so volatile is because people stop using this and start functioning from here. And we don't make good decisions sometimes when we do that. And they are volatile. There is no absolute solution to the response. The most dangerous calls my officers respond to are domestics. So there really isn't any great protocol out there except we're cautious. We try to take into consideration everything that probably is on your mind, like what has this person said in the past? What have they done in the past? How do we predict the future? You know, we can't, but we take a look at past behavior and conduct. But that's a really, really tough question. There's no right or wrong answer. We do the best we can, and I know all the officers in this room have dealt with this over and over again. We never know when we go to a domestic if it's just someone trying to win an argument or if it's gone past that. But if you look at the murders in this state related to domestics, once again, they're pretty high. The numbers are pretty high. Judy.
Thank you. Pertaining to the keywords on the banner, I was wondering if one of the medical professionals here would be able to remind to us or answer the question of what are the meanings of FAST? Is it face, arms, slow speech or tiredness, and the how to respond in a timely fashion to those type of cardiovascular emergencies?
Okay, so you're talking about the stroke, FAST. So FAST stands for, yes, face, so droopiness, one side or the other. Arms, meaning do they have control of them? Are they weak? Do they drift? And S is speech, so ask them to say something. They always say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So ask them to say something. How's their speech? Is it normal? And T is for time. Time is very, very important when you're talking about stroke assessment. When's the last time they were their normal self? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and I think it emphasizes the time factor here, engaging professionals in the timely fashion and not hesitating to act is one of the key factors in that. Thank you.
Al?
Thank you. Chief, if I'm a teacher and my spouse threatens to kill me, am I obligated to tell the principal that there might be a threat?
Did you hear me all right? I usually don't need a microphone. Yeah, I would say you are, but it's a moral obligation, not a legal obligation. And it would depend on circumstances. So, you know, if once a week you and your wife have an argument, and at some point during that argument, she says, oh, shut up, or I'm going to kill you, and she says that every week, it might not have the same value as if she's never said that before, and suddenly she says that. But, you know, again, that could be a domestic situation, and domestics come in all shapes and sizes. It doesn't just have to be the kids or their parents. It could be staff, it could be employees.
Lady over here. There you go.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for doing this, because I totally feel empowered now, which is really great. So I want to thank everybody who pulled this together. On your first slide, you had a couple bullet points. You had response, action, and prevention. And I know this may not be part of tonight, but this prevention piece, I think, is something that we need to dive a little bit deeper into. I'm thinking a lot about how do we assess situations, how do we assess our friends, whether we're students, how do we look for those signs of folks that are in crisis, who are in trouble. And so how do we work with social services a little bit deeper? I'm hoping for a program, an acronym, or something that's like that for that part of how the community can start to raise our awareness and better support teens and adults in crisis.
I don't. I'm putting it out there as like the next step, because this is only part, right? This is a great part to be focused on and to try to be putting as part of the solutions, but that prevention piece, I think, is another place where we tend to forget to focus some of our energy. It's a lot like you saying, we're not having this conversation, so this is the part that we like to talk about, because it's that one that's really big, but it's the prevention piece that's a little bit tougher to kind of pull apart and think about what can we do.
Go ahead.
So my question is, it kind of dovetails into the last two questions, and it's really about the see something, say something aspect. And I realize in some cases your law enforcement's hands are tied when it comes to, you know, if someone hasn't broken a law, you may not be able to take any action. But at what point does something become actionable, whether it's something posted on social media, or maybe, you know, you've got a disgruntled coworker or a neighbor that's, you know, looks like they're ready to snap. At what point are you able to take action on those types of things?
Well, I think it varies. I think probably the best example is what happened in Fairhaven. Commissioner, is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
I think that we're going to err on the side of caution. So this is the tough part about prevention. First off, it's a very, very big lift. And it has a lot more to do with our medical, psychological communities, the medical people who are responsible for that side of it. We're struggling in this state right now to deal with mental health issues and how that gets interpreted and how we respond to that on the streets. Prevention's a tough one, but I can tell you that I think in cases where there are threats and specific information that causes a normal person to be shocked or upset or concerned, I think those cases are going to get a lot of attention, and it's going to get a lot more eyes than just mine or just ours. It's going to include people higher on the food chain, and we're going to try to make an assessment about whether this is actionable or not. And quite honestly, in the arena of prevention, in most cases, it's not actionable by the police. Remember, we enforce criminal law. Our job is criminal law and the peace and tranquility of our community. And when we start to get into that side of it, we're really fish out of water. We're trying, but it's not our bailiwick.
Emerson, one quick question to Paul. You mentioned, Chief, or one of the officers mentioned about City Hall and, of course, the elementary schools, you know, action plans or preparedness plans. But I was wondering, does the police department keep on file floor plans for other public buildings, such as, you know, the local churches, because there have been shootings at churches across the country, you know, our public library, other public buildings? Like, if you had copies of their floor plans, would that be helpful so that you'd know, oh yeah, this is the layout, these are the exits? Could those businesses or whatever provide you with copies of floor plans? And would that be helpful? I mean,
yes, I would ask you to submit them as PDFs, because like in the case of the police department here, we've loaded all of that information on the laptops that are in the cruisers so that the officers can pull them up quickly. Because documents are too cumbersome to try to carry that all around with you. So yes, absolutely, if we could get floor plans, we're interested in that. I'd ask you to PDF them so we can just copy them into a file.
Thank you.
Judy, go ahead.
Okay, so at schools we practice lockdowns, fire drills, and secure the buildings. And we had a class meeting the other week about safety procedures and stuff. But have you guys ever given thought of like practicing evacuations? Like there's been some talk to City Hall and the complex. Are school officials going to like enact that into as practicing those kind of drills too, or no?
The short answer is yes. We're having conversations like that right now with a couple of the principals and with the superintendent's office. We haven't done it as of yet, but we are talking about doing that and fleshing that out more.
I mean, I guess that's one of my follow-up questions, as the journalist is coming out at me. I'm really curious, following up on her question, what the bridge is, Gary, between the conversation that we're having tonight and actually the schools themselves or the hospital or area businesses. I mean, you know, we've got school officials here. Are they integrated in with the Run Hide program?
So everybody that we work with in St. Albans understands, and we have agreed to work together, and Run, Hide, Fight is the model that we use for all the schools, for the hospital, for our bigger employees, our larger employers. This is what I would tell you is we're pretty active in pursuing the larger partners in our community. We'll seek them out to try to get them to the table to find out what their emergency operations plans are. But it really is their responsibility to have an emergency operations plan. And for us to know what that is and to work together so that we're partners in that effort. We certainly are partners with the school, with the hospital, with INS, with City Hall. I'm trying to think if there's anybody, there is no one that I'm aware of in the city or town that we haven't partnered with, in which we aren't all in complete agreement and working together on a solution. This is what I would tell you about all those front-loaded plans that the police department have made. They're invaluable for us, but it's vitally important that each one of those facilities has their own plan, front-loaded plan, on who's going to do what if something happens in their building or their facility. Because it does no good if we are the only ones doing that, because when we get to the blockade, it is, so who's doing what here? Whose job is it? Has anybody figured that out? So we're trying hard to do that. It's a lot of work, and it changes constantly, and it changes based on personalities, it changes based on reconstruction, remodeling. The hospital, I have to tell you, is one of the most overwhelming things in the community to try to look at, because there have been so many changes there, construction changes. And how do you deal with all that? So it's a slow process, but yes, we do that.
Any other questions? Al, we have one more. This is the last question.
I just have one more question. With all employees in all these different facilities have veterans, have you ever reached out to veterans to be part of your resources to help the school or the hospital or whatever? Many of us veterans have combat training.
Yeah, ironically, Al, before you and I spoke about this a few months ago, we had not. Since then, I will tell you that we work closely with Major Trudell. He's an active duty member, and he runs civil service. Ron, do you know what the name of their outfit is? They're the people that will come in. He has a whole team of them with specialized equipment. If you have a meth lab, they can do air quality monitoring. They have a tremendous amount of mass, I don't know the right term. They can detect chemicals, all those things. So Major Trudell's a regular part of our monthly emergency management meeting, and we have had talks and plans with them. And recently we've been visited by the new commander in charge of the armory here in the city and in the town, and he's volunteered to have his people involved with more things. So we're just starting to explore that option, but we haven't really sought out the veterans who are inactive. Before we do end, though, I did want to give the commissioner a chance. He wanted to speak just briefly about the governor's initiative on threat assessment for the schools.
I know I'm standing between everybody and getting out of here, so I will be quick. I'm Tom Anderson, I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Vermont. I want to thank you for inviting me tonight. I want to thank the chief for putting this on. I want to thank all the law enforcement that's here, EMTs, most of all the public, the educators, the legislators that are here. Thank you all for coming. It's obviously an incredibly important topic. You know, the Fairhaven thing was sort of a tipping point. I think coming on the heels of the Parkland shooting, it really did alter the governor's thinking on a lot of these issues. I mean, he was genuinely his views were generally changed on that. He's instituted some things that he wanted public safety to do and the Department of Education to do. And one of those is we are currently in the process of doing assessments of every single school in Vermont. Where are our gaps? What can we do better? What are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? How can we then coordinate planning and emergency planning for these types of things going forward? And the governor is also, he's addressed this head on. We're also looking at the legislature for funding for once we do these assessments and we see these gaps. Does that include better planning? Does it include hardening some of the schools? Does it include putting video cameras, locks, window shades on windows? And he's asked the legislature for up to $5 million for grants to allow the schools to make those types of improvements. So the governor showed, I think, incredible political courage on this issue. The easy thing, the politically easy thing to do would be do nothing. But he has really attacked it head on and formed this assessment, try to get some money out there by way of grants to harden our schools and make the schools as safe as we can. Keep in mind, Vermont has great schools and very safe schools. The School Resource Center that is run out of the Department of Education and DPS does tremendous work. I would encourage you to go to their website to look at it. So this is not something like we're starting from scratch. There has been a tremendous amount of planning that's been going on in the schools, and this is really to enhance that. Where do we have some gaps, and how can we do it better? So I think that's critically important. And again, thanks for the invite, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks.
So I'm Judy Ashley. I'm with the Health Department here in St. Albans. We cover Franklin and Grand Isle counties. And one of our jobs is to support the Northwest Medical Reserve Corps. So all those folks right back there in their red shirts, Ellen and Frank and Pam. They are all volunteers, and they participate in our county by supporting a lot of events. We're always in need of volunteers, and just because it says Medical Reserve Corps, you don't have to have a medical background. We need people who can do all kinds of things. One of the things they do is at the Maple Fest, and they're there having a first aid tent, but they do other things like this, helping to register for events like this and participate in this. So if you're interested in being a volunteer, it's very well organized. Helen Short is our leader up there, but you can talk to anybody in a red shirt, and we would love to have you as a volunteer to support our community. Thank you.
So that concludes the evening's presentation. I just want to say thank you very much for everybody in attendance. My rough count is about 125 people showed up, and considering the weather, I think that's commendable. Once again, the lasting message here is please, what you heard tonight, take the message forward. And good night. Drive carefully.
Thank you.